April 20th, 1789. George Washington, the former commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, has been called back into service by his new nation, the United States of America. For 8 years, Washington led the Continental Army through a war against the most powerful empire in the world. A war few believed he could win. Now he is on the 5th day of a journey to the city of New York, where he will be sworn in as America's first president. At each town along the way, banquets and parties are thrown as the new nation celebrates the great American hero of the Revolution. Next stop, City Tavern. The city, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, the former rebel capital, is a fitting halfway stop on Washington's journey. 11 years earlier, he faced one of his greatest challenges at a place just outside the city, a place that even now, in 1789, has become an American legend, a place called Valley Forge. January 1778. Washington is making winter camp at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It has been another long year of fighting, and his men are in desperate need of rest, of resupplying, of retraining. But building and running a camp a third the size of Philadelphia is a mammoth undertaking. Washington relishes the task, overseeing to the last detail the layout of the barracks, the placement of roads, the location of defenses. His hands-on approach wins the admiration of his soldiers. He assures his men that he will share in every hardship and partake in every inconvenience. And for the first month, he lives in a tent at the edge of camp, alongside his soldiers. Yet, for all his efforts, supply shortages become a problem. Washington pleads with Congress for more aid, but to little avail. By February, 2,500 soldiers are dead from disease, more than have been killed in battle since the war began. Thousands of others are stricken with sickness and hunger. Washington will need help to turn this looming disaster around. In mid-February, a new recruit arrives in camp. A foreign officer sent by the Continental Congress to lend badly needed experience to the cause. He calls himself Frederick William Augustus Heinrich Ferdinand Baron von Steuben and wears a bejeweled cross representing an honorary knighthood from Prussia. Curiously, von Steuben carries no papers confirming his supposed achievements. But Washington is desperate for leadership, for officers with European training. And he puts von Steuben to work.
Baron von Steuben is a remarkable figure. Von Steuben's genius was the ability to distill the complexity of state-of-the-art European drill tactics into a digestible form to this raw material that was the American soldier.
Under von Steuben's tutelage, Washington's ragtag army learns how to form solid, orderly columns, how to properly load and fire a weapon in formation, and the proper use of a bayonet.
Von Steuben brings a new level of professionalism to the army, and that by itself creates its own sense of belonging. They're belonging to something larger than themselves.
Every soldier is taught von Steuben's techniques, which become the basis of the Army's first training manual. Von Steuben's work gives Washington confidence. His army is now ready to meet the British head-on. With the spring thaw comes news that the British are pulling out of Philadelphia and marching overland back to New York City. Britain's archenemy, France, has recently entered the war, and from his headquarters in Philadelphia, General Henry Clinton, Britain's new commanding officer, fears that an approaching French fleet will blockade New York City. He is determined to protect the city at all costs. Washington, eager to avenge his loss of Philadelphia the year before, decides to go on the offensive against the British as they cross New Jersey.
His army has been trained and turned into a new and hard-fighting army. And that army and its commander are now convinced that they can beat any army on the face of the earth, and they are eager for the fight. And that fight comes on one of the hottest days of the war.
June 28, 1778. In a searing heat, the Continental Army catches up with the British at a New Jersey crossroads called Monmouth Courthouse. Washington's second in command on this day is another of his old nemeses, General Charles Lee. Lee is charged with leading the advance force, while Washington forms a second wave of 7,000 soldiers 7 miles behind. 3 hours into the fight, Washington waits near the front line of battle where he encounters Lee's soldiers, who appear to be in retreat.
Lee was not attacking. What was going on here?
In fact, Lee had no battle plan. Nothing. He was hopeful of victory somehow. It's obvious to all the men at Monmouth that there is no plan. The men retreat.
In a fury, Washington rides ahead and intercepts General Lee himself.
Nobody accurately knows what Washington said because it was almost sacrilegious to write down when George Washington swore. And whatever he called Lee, it was enough for Lee to get the idea and to get out of there.
It is not the first time Lee has ignored Washington's orders, but it will certainly be the last. Lee retires to the rear in shame. Washington now takes charge, ordering his retreating soldiers to form ranks, to create a new front line against the fast-approaching redcoats. By the time the British arrive, exhausted from their march in woolen uniforms in the 100-degree heat, they find the Continental Army in a strong defensive position. The winter's training at Valley Forge has paid off, and Washington knows it.
He then does something astounding. He rides back and forth in front of his lines to rally the troops, putting himself in the line of fire, risking his life as he asked his own men to risk their lives. The British open up on him and miraculously miss him.
The Battle of Monmouth erupts. More than 20,000 soldiers clash continuously for 5 hours in the brutal heat, longer than any other battle of the war, in some of the most intense fighting these men have ever seen. Sunstroke kills as many as musket balls.
When the smoke had cleared at Monmouth, it was a draw. Washington knew and the country knew that this new army that had come out of Valley Forge was a good one. They had held their own against the British. This renews the public's spirit for the war and forever solidifies Washington's position as the unquestioned commander-in-chief.
11 years after the Battle of Monmouth, as his friends in Philadelphia toast his send-off to the presidency, that scorching June day stands as the moment Washington silenced Charles Lee and all his other critics, the day he climbed back on the road to immortality. April 21st, 1789. Day 6 of George Washington's journey to New York City gets underway. As he leaves Philadelphia, Washington is reminded of the man he personally appointed to run the city, a bold and brave American general he once admired and respected, and now despises more than any other man. Benedict Arnold, one of the most troubled and treacherous characters of the Revolution. July 1778, City Tavern. Benedict Arnold has recently arrived in Philadelphia to assume his new post as military governor. He will attempt to restore order to the city after 9 months of British occupation. Quite well-heeled now, Arnold seems to have forgotten his own troubled background. Though born into a prominent Connecticut family, Arnold's alcoholic father squandered their fortune, forcing his son to take a lowly apprenticeship as an apothecary. The determined young boy grew to become a successful yet angry man with ambitions of becoming a gentleman, and once war broke out, a hero. In 1775, it was Arnold who helped lead a daring raid on a remote British outpost, Fort Ticonderoga. But Arnold's co-commander on that mission, the wily frontiersman Ethan Allen, took complete credit for the capture of the fort. 2 years later at Saratoga, Arnold's battlefield heroics were again usurped by a fellow officer, Horatio Gates. Though it was Arnold who led the fight and suffered a near-fatal wound, he received no credit for the victory.
The people and the press hailed Gates as the new American hero. In fact, the hero of the battle was Benedict Arnold.
Crippled by the injury from Saratoga, Arnold has relinquished a battlefield command for this new post in Philadelphia. Determined to make the best of it, he now throws himself into the job, but his actions begin to raise questions.
Arnold's first act was to close all the stores. He said to take an inventory of what there was available, but immediately the accusations began to fly that he was cornering the market on goods that he was going to sell himself. I don't think Benedict Arnold was doing anything that many of the other generals on both sides did as a matter of custom. He was just doing what was common practice at the time, but he got nailed for it.
Arnold's questionable business dealings come under fire in the press, with charges of corruption and abuse of power. Charges compounded by his choice in women. Arnold courts and marries 18-year-old Peggy Shippen, a beautiful young lady from a wealthy family, and a suspected loyalist.
She was a gorgeous young woman. She was extremely well educated by her father, could run a business which appealed to a Yankee merchant like Arnold. Today they would be considered a dynamite couple.
But they are a couple under intense scrutiny. In an overheated political climate, the cries against Arnold's actions escalate for nearly a year. They are charges that will have to be answered. March 5th, 1779, Benedict Arnold stands in the Continental Congress, called by a special investigative committee to answer the accusations levied against him. In his mind, he is yet again underappreciated, his honor unfairly tarnished.
His statement is really a recitation of all that he did and all that he had lost. He'd been crippled for life. He'd been passed over for promotion several times, and he thought he had lost his honor with its lingering cloud over him.
Arnold's impassioned defense vindicates him in front of Congress. But the charges just won't go away. Leading the attack against Arnold is Joseph Reed, formerly one of Washington's trusted officers, now the acting governor for the state of Pennsylvania. Reed threatens to withdraw Pennsylvania's support for the war if Washington refuses to take action against Arnold. And George Washington is forced to weigh in. The commander-in-chief wants to give the talented Arnold a well-deserved field command, but he needs Pennsylvania's support and agrees to issue a written rebuke to Arnold. Once the affair blows over, he can give Arnold the intended promotion. When Arnold receives the ruling from his commander-in-chief, the words are stinging. Reprehensible, imprudent, improper. For Arnold, it is the final slight. Now, in his mind, betrayed, he devises a betrayal of his own. He taps an old friend of Peggy's from the occupation of Philadelphia, British Major John Andre, and offers to surrender a mighty fort to the British in exchange for 20,000 British pounds and a general's rank in their army. It is a fort that even bears the general's name, Fort Arnold, also known as West Point. West Point is a prize the British have coveted since the beginning of the war, but have never been able to take with a military offensive. Control West Point, and you control the vital Hudson River, severing communication between New England and the rest of the colonies.
At West Point, the river remains tidal, which is to say at some times of the day it flows south and at other times of the day it flows north. This made West Point an ideal place to mount cannons on both sides of the river as ships had to navigate this very tricky curve.
The British readily agree to Benedict Arnold's terms, and Arnold sets his plot in motion. Arnold takes a meeting with his commander-in-chief and uses Washington's desire to give him a field command to his advantage, persuading Washington to instead give him control of West Point.
George Washington was puzzled that Benedict Arnold would want the command of West Point. Washington wanted to put him back into the line of battle, but Arnold insisted on West Point because that was the deal with the British.
Now in charge of West Point, Arnold prepares detailed information on the fort and sets a meeting with the enemy. September 21st. Benedict Arnold and his British contact, Major John Andre, come face to face along the banks of the Hudson River. They go over the plans of the fort and troop movements. Arnold's treason is now complete.
I think the biggest misconception about Arnold's treason is he did it for the money. I don't think he did. I don't think it was as simple as that. He did it for his pride. The money was secondary.
Arnold will now wait for the moment when he and Peggy can slip quietly behind the British lines. But news is about to arrive that will change everything. Andre has been captured, and on him are discovered the plans to West Point. Arnold knows it is only a matter of moments before the plot is uncovered, so he flees. Just a few miles away, a familiar figure is making his way towards a breakfast meeting with a trusted general. When Washington arrives, it is clear something is amiss. Arnold is nowhere to be found, and Washington gets the news. John Andre has been captured with the plans to West Point. It all adds up to one undeniable conclusion. One of the great heroes of the Revolution has sold out to the British. In British-held New York City, there is a new officer in their ranks, Brigadier General Benedict Arnold. His loving wife, Peggy, forced in shame from Philadelphia, now by his side. Arnold's treason was the highest in the young history of America. It was an act that shook George Washington to the core. That one of his highest-ranking generals could betray the cause forever raised the question, who else might be considering the same? April 22nd, 1789. The last 2 days of George Washington's journey to the American presidency takes him through the countryside of New Jersey, a place of both grave humiliation and great success. It was here that his army retreated from the British in 1776. Here where he made his greatest reversal of fortune with a surprise attack at Trenton. But it was the winters at Morristown that proved to be his greatest challenge. Morristown, 1780. Washington has just received a dispatch from his Southern army. They have been forced to surrender. Nearly 5,000 soldiers have fallen to the British at Charleston, South Carolina. His Southern army is now lost, the South's major port in British hands. Outside of Washington's headquarters, the brutal winter of 1780 is taking a mighty toll on his army.
The winter encampment in Morristown was a lot harder than the encampment in Valley Forge. Valley Forge seems to get all the press, but Morristown was really dire straits.
It was a long winter. It snowed in May. Soldiers are starving.
Dissension and insubordination grow in the ranks. Some soldiers even threaten mutiny. Washington must step forward and rescue his command from the threat of chaos. Eight nooses, prepared for 8 men charged with various offenses. Insubordination, forging documents, theft. All are sentenced to death. Washington orders the execution held before the entire camp for all his men to see. It is a carefully choreographed event.
Washington wanted to use capital punishment particularly sparingly, but he also knew it was great theater.
All 8 were put on top of the gallows. Their graves had been dug in front of the gallows, and their coffins, which he ordered manufactured, placed next to the graves. As they were about to be hung, a soldier stepped forward from the crowd. Reprieve. Reprieve from the commander-in-chief. 7 of the 8 were freed.
This time, just 1 man will hang for his crimes. But it would not be the end of the problems in Washington's ranks. One year later, it happens again. Mutiny erupts. Now it appears as if the Continental Army is unraveling, and without the army, there is no revolution. Washington takes swift and decisive action. Leaders of 200 mutineers are condemned to death. And to carry out the task of execution, Washington orders a group of the other mutineers to form the firing squad, to pull the trigger on their own comrades in arms. It is a psychologically devastating punishment. The Morristown winters of 1780 and 1781 were some of Washington's darkest days. His army and the cause seemed to be coming apart. The war had to come to an end soon, but the question was how? The answer would come from the southern colonies, where one of Washington's favorite generals was leading a swift, moving fight. February 1781, North Carolina. Major General Nathaniel Greene is in the thick of a campaign against British General Charles Cornwallis. Rhode Island's native son and his force of 1,000 are traveling light, using guerrilla tactics against the heavily laden British Southern Army. A backwoods game of cat and mouse that wears the redcoats down. The fights are few, but take a heavy toll. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina costs the British a quarter of their troops. By the summer, Cornwallis is spent. His weakened army limps into a small Virginia port named Yorktown. What happens next has not come before in the war. All the pieces fall into place for Washington, one after the other. The French dispatch a fleet north from the Caribbean. Washington marches his army south, while British General Henry Clinton chooses to keep his men protecting New York. All roads now lead to Yorktown and an assault on Cornwallis. For 11 days, the Americans and French lay siege to the city, tightening the noose around the British army. Surrounded, cut off, and unsupported, it is only a matter of time until the British supplies run out, until they must yield and surrender. For all practical purposes, the war is now over. Now, 7.5 years later, the victorious general who led his nation's soldiers on the battlefield, and 2 years later, its politicians through a constitutional convention, is about to begin the third act of his remarkable revolutionary life. As his coach finally brings him to the outskirts of New York City, George Washington will, in a matter of days, become President Washington. April 23, 1789. George Washington enters the 8th and final day of his journey across many of the American states. A journey to the city of New York, where he will be sworn in as the country's first president. If there was ever a question in Washington's mind of the admiration the young nation has for him, this ride serves as testament to his fame.
The newspapers of the era printed George Washington's route. There was no television at that time. There was no CNN, no radio. But the newspapers were read by everybody. So the entire country knew where he was going and what time. The highways are filled with people who have ridden days just to see him. They bring their grandchildren so that their grandchildren can tell their grandchildren to tell their grandchildren they actually saw George Washington, this great national hero.
It is a much-deserved hero's welcome for the former commander-in-chief and soon-to-be leader of the new nation. A nation that won a war, but still has a long road to travel.
In 1789, the new United States is an extraordinarily energetic, diverse, but also unstable place.
It's a turbulent time in the country. People are apprehensive about the future. All the soldiers, all the gallant, brave young men of the war, 240,000 of them fought in the Revolution, but there aren't 240,000 jobs for them when they go home. A lot of them are unemployed. Politically, the country is a mess.
The very ideals that set the country ablaze and drove her to revolution individual liberty, representative government, freedom are no longer just lofty goals. They are being put into practice across the land.
People seem to think that democracy means that everybody should govern. Maybe they should not. Pennsylvania has over 400 people in its state legislature. If you put 12 politicians in a room, it's hard to get anything done. Put 400 in a room. There is no one man that can hold the country together, except him.
In defeating the British, America has won her independence, and under Washington's guidance, she must now become a winning nation. But the war for independence has left many losers in its wake. Britain has lost her colonies, a crushing blow to the empire. But somewhat surprisingly, it is America's closest ally, France, that suffers the most.
The French are kind of left holding the bag in this conflict.
The French aid for the American war has generally been estimated at something like $13 billion in today's dollars. We wouldn't have had any uniforms, we wouldn't have had any munitions without the French. But from the French point of view, they are bankrupted by our war, and of course it will have disastrous consequences for them.
France, in 1789, bankrupt and weakened, is hit by an even greater wave as the democratic earthquake that ripped the American colonies from Britain hits France's shores with a vengeance. Peasants and commoners alike rise up against the monarchy. Tearing down centuries of feudal rule, the French people hold their own revolution. Back in the colonies, restoring peace in the wake of a wrenching war is first and foremost in Washington's mind. In a war between brothers, where people have been forced to take sides, those who chose to remain with the crown, the Loyalists, have to come to grips with their loss. And many are still on American soil.
It does take several years for the Loyalists who stay in the newly established United States to be reincorporated as members of the society. But one of the things you don't see in this country is a massive retaliation against the Loyalists. And that is due to the nature of the American Revolution and to its leadership.
This is the country Washington will have to govern, a country in need of peace between Loyalists and patriots. A country where many African Americans, participants in the struggle for national independence, find themselves still in the bonds of slavery. Where American Indians, many who sided with the Patriot cause, find themselves forced out of the national dialogue. It is a complicated picture indeed.
Nobody had created a republic that was this big geographically or contained so many different types of people. It really threw the rules of what a democracy, what a republic could be out the window and said, we're going to change all of that.
The final day of George Washington's journey nears its end. He makes one final crossing, leaving New Jersey on a barge that carries him to the city of New York.
Alongside his barge is a barge full of Continental soldiers. In another barge is a choir of men and women. And he notices that the old standard, God Save the King, has now been translated into God Save George Washington. He had considered himself father of the army. The next logical step to him would be to be the father of his country.
The inauguration of George Washington, the great hero of the Revolution, is just days away. George Washington, the father of the American Army, is about to assume a new role as the father of America, the first president of the United States. It is April 30th, 1789, and today he will be sworn in at New York City's Federal Hall, the final step in his long journey, a journey no other man has known.
It's important to remember that the American presidency and this Constitution is an innovation that comes out of this period. No one quite knows what the role is. It's not a monarch, it's not a king, it's something new, so it has to be invented.
At Federal Hall, Washington visits the chamber of the newly created Congress. Massachusetts firebrand John Adams is vice president at his side. It is a day for celebration, a day for ceremony, and every ceremonial detail must be created from scratch. Even how to swear in a president.
In the 5 days prior to the inauguration, Congress had battled back and forth. Should the president be sworn in inside? Should he be sworn in outside? Everything that Congress did and President-elect Washington did was precedent-setting. And they knew that, and he knew that.
In the end, George Washington himself makes the decision. He will be sworn in outside, out among the American people. April 30th, 1789, America's first inauguration. George Washington takes his position on the balcony at Federal Hall. Thousands look on. Months of planning have led to this moment, though there is one small detail that has been overlooked.
In all the planning, they forgot to get a Bible. At the last minute, somebody runs 2 blocks to a fraternal organization and borrows their Bible to tell them George Washington is going to be sworn in on it.
With everything now in place, the ceremony begins. A revolution that began with self-evident truths has given birth to a constitution and a leader to preserve, protect, and defend it.
He takes the oath of office, and as he ends it, adding himself in a confident voice, says, "So help me God." Justice Livingston turns to the crowd and says, "Long live George Washington, the President of the United States." The crowd just roars.
George Washington takes his place in history. And although some wanted him to have a grand title, Washington, ever the Virginia gentleman, insists on being called simply Mr. President.
No one knew whether this was going to work. There are observers speculating that just give them a few years, they're going to be tearing each other apart.
Many people at that time said that the war did not end the revolution. The revolution ends with new democratic government, this great experiment in the world. The inauguration of George Washington was not the end of the story. It was just the start of the story.
"25,000 gave their lives for liberty. And long after the heroes of the Revolution came home, others took their place in history. John Adams, the great firebrand of the Revolution, became the second President of the United States. He died, somewhat fittingly, on Independence Day, July 4th, 1826, reportedly saying, "Thomas Jefferson survives." But that was not the case. 5 hours earlier, on that same day, Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, whose Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of America with a single stroke, died at the age of 83 at his home, Monticello. Benjamin Franklin, the man who delivered the French to the American cause, withdraws from public life in 1788 due to ill health and dies 2 years later at the age of 84. 20,000 people attend the funeral of the man who tamed lightning. British Commander-in-Chief Henry Clinton returned to England after the crushing loss at Yorktown, where he received a very cool reception. He spent the last years of his life compiling his complete memoirs, a vain effort to vindicate himself for losing the war. Britain's King George III, never able to crush the American rebels, went mad and was deemed mentally unfit to rule for the final decade of his reign. Benedict Arnold, the Connecticut-born Yankee and America's greatest traitor, landed in London after the war, where he failed as a businessman. He died a broken man at the age of 60, suffering one final slight. Arnold was buried without military honors in a grave mistakenly marked with another man's name. Frederick William Augustus Heinrich Ferdinand Baron von Steuben, the man who almost single-handedly whipped Washington's army into shape over the winter at Valley Forge, was rewarded for his efforts with 16,000 acres of land in upper New York State. He died there a bachelor in 1794. Nathaniel Greene, the Rhode Island Quaker and George Washington's favorite general, never got to see the swearing in of his old commander. He died of sunstroke in 1786 while on a plantation in Georgia. George Washington served as President of the United States for 2 terms, refusing to accept a third. He returned to his beloved Mount Vernon home in 1797, finally leaving his life of service behind him. He died just 2 years later, at the age of 67. In one final act for her ever-private husband, Martha Washington burned their personal letters written throughout the war, a record of a man and a war forever lost to time. The American Revolution, a colonial rebellion, a revolution of ideas, a revolution between brothers, a revolution for independence. December 1776. At a secret location along the French coast, a shipment is being prepared. Rifles, uniforms, gunpowder, and ammunition are crated and boarded, bound for America. It is a gesture of solidarity from France against their common enemy, Great Britain. The weapons will aid Washington's notoriously undersupplied army, which has just unleashed a Christmas surprise on the British. The Battle of Trenton has bolstered the rebels. But America needs more than supplies to turn the tide of war. What General George Washington really needs is money and a navy. In pursuit of this goal, the Americans have sent their own secret weapon to France. He arrives on a crisp December morning along the French coast. He is old and frail, with a variety of ailments. But Benjamin Franklin is also the most famous revolutionary leader in Europe. Franklin is the man who tamed lightning, a renowned scientist, inventor, and writer who brought the simple wisdom of Poor Richard to the world.
When Franklin gets to France, there's an enormous sense of consternation. What is this figurehead? What is this great celebrity doing here? And remember, given the way the media worked in those days, he washes up on the shores of Brittany with no announcement, and there are all sorts of wonderful rumors afoot as to what he's doing in France. He's come to buy himself a chateau with his immense fortune. He's come to educate his grandsons in Europe because the schools are better. Every possible idea is put forth. The idea that he's actually there to enlist the French in this cause is not the obvious conclusion. And he doesn't feel he has to illuminate anyone.
Franklin arrives into a deeply divided nation, no place more so than Paris itself. The wealthy live in opulence, while the poor walk on city streets ankle deep in waste and excrement. This dichotomy has produced new thinking about Europe's age-old system of class. The French read Thomas Paine and cheer America's revolution. As one Frenchman noted, there is 100 times more enthusiasm for this revolution in the Paris cafes than in the colonies. Franklin plays on this enthusiasm. Now, in one of the most opulent courts in Europe, the home of Marie Antoinette, Franklin presents a simple yet carefully crafted portrait of America and all things American.
Picture me very plainly dressed, wearing my thin gray straight hair that peeps out from under my only coiffure, a fine fur cap which comes down to my forehead almost to my spectacles. Think how this must appear among the powdered heads of Paris. Benjamin Franklin.
Franklin plays on this romance. He dresses very plainly, he wears a beaver cap, and he becomes kind of a fad. The women love to be around Franklin. They think there's something kind of very romantic about this backwoodsman who's here in their midst.
Before long, all the fashionable women are wearing their hair in a style that mimics Franklin's fur cap. They call the style à la Franklin. But not all quarters are equally charmed. December 28, 1776. Ben Franklin arrives at Versailles, home to King Louis XVI.
It seems like a fool's errand when you think about it. Franklin is sent to an absolute monarchy to ask them to fund a revolution against a king. But the truth is that the animus on the French part against the English is so great that this is a very easy argument to make.
Franklin is greeted by France's foreign minister, the crafty Comte de Vergennes. Vergennes is the one behind France's covert arms shipments.
Anyone in his right mind would have assumed that the best thing to do would have been to let the colonies and England destroy each other mutually and not to intervene. But he is dead set on revenge. It's the one thing he needs to accomplish, and he could not be more eager.
He is intrigued by the revolution, but France needs to know they are backing a winner. Franklin's attuned sense of gamesmanship tells him the time is not right. That, and the fact King Louis XVI refuses to meet with him. But without France, the threadbare American Revolution is in peril. For now, Franklin will have to wait and pin his hopes on events 3,000 miles away, where only a great American victory could budge the French. But that couldn't seem less likely. Back in New Jersey, the Continental Army is in bad shape. The Americans have not yet figured out how to feed and supply the army. John Adams, the always outspoken member of Congress, complains,
"Our army is an object of wretchedness enough to fill a human mind with horror. Disgraced, defeated, discontented, dispirited, diseased, naked, undisciplined, eaten up with vermin. No clothes, beds, or blankets. No medicines, no victuals but salt pork and flour."
And as winter turns to spring, the problems only worsen. no one is joining the army. And officers sent on recruiting missions must dig deeper to fill the quotas for new recruits.
The colonists, like every generation before or after, seem convinced that the war is going to be over by Christmas. When the war isn't over by Christmas, Washington has a hard time recruiting soldiers. And it's in 1777 that we see many states beginning to offer significantly increased bounties. That's a cash payment for enlistment. Service in the Continental Army is now offered as an alternative to corporal punishment when you're brought into court. Service in the Continental Army is encouraged for vagrants.
The shortages of trained soldiers hits the Army hard. No place more than the northern American outpost of Fort Ticonderoga, where America's inexperienced recruits are about to become the target of a major British attack. America's envoy in Paris, Benjamin Franklin, has made his first overtures to the French, an attempt to get the European power to join in the fight against their age-old enemy, England. But for now, the elder statesman has come away empty-handed. Swaying the French will take a major American victory back in the colonies, where the British are getting ready to mount a new round of assaults. June 1777. Just south of Montreal, Canada, a new British general has arrived in America. General John Burgoyne surrounds himself with all the trappings that wealth and status afford. He has recently returned to the colonies, where he witnessed the British loss of Boston just 2 years earlier. Burgoyne's goal, to take revenge and end the war, whatever the cost. It is an endgame he has staked his career on. John Burgoyne has always led the good life. A gambler, a military man by career, a playwright by hobby, a social climber by marriage, Gentleman Johnny, as his soldiers call him, leans towards the dramatic. Before his return to America in June, the cocky Burgoyne wagers that he will have the war won by Christmas. Charles Fox, a member of Parliament who stood in opposition to the war, takes the bet with a warning.
Be not over-sanguine. I believe when you return to England, you will be a prisoner on parole. Charles Fox.
As commander of Britain's northern forces, Burgoyne aims to take the Hudson River, the vital waterway that separates the northern colonies from the southern colonies.
It's important to realize that in the 18th century, there are no bridges across this river. There are only a limited number of crossing points. If you control those points, you control key terrain, and you are able to sever the lines of communication that the colonists are able to use to coordinate their actions between Boston and Philadelphia, and certainly prohibit the transfer of troops from one side of the river to the other.
The British plan requires precise coordination across great distances. Burgoyne's force will move south down the Hudson to meet up with the man in charge for the British, General William Howe, whose forces will march north from New York City. Burgoyne's first target is a remote northern outpost, the mighty Fort Ticonderoga.
People referred to it as the Gibraltar of the North, or the Gibraltar of North America. It was, by all standards, the most spectacular fortress in North America. Angled bastions, very defensible, and it sits astride this very, very strategic water corridor.
July 2nd, 1777. General Burgoyne's force of 8,000 descends upon Fort Ticonderoga. The undermanned Americans are at a mighty disadvantage. Just 2,500 Continentals guard the fort. Skirmishes break out around the stronghold as British soldiers snipe at the Americans. But taking the fort will require a strategic advantage. Fort Ticonderoga sits on a peninsula surrounded by 3 mountains, but the lean American forces can only defend 2 of them. The steepest and most formidable, the aptly named Mount Defiance, is left unprotected. But from its ridge, artillery has an easy shot into the fort. It is the weak spot that Burgoyne will exploit. July 5th. Burgoyne dispatches a unit to the west side of Mount Defiance. Their mission? To drag their cannon to the top. It is a treacherous climb, but out of sight of the Americans. By noon, they crest the ridge and position themselves for a clear shot into the fort. With one move, Burgoyne puts the Americans in an indefensible position. And without firing their cannon once, leave the outmaneuvered Americans no choice but to retreat. It is an easy win for Burgoyne and bolsters his belief that the campaign to take the Hudson River will be a simple one. News of the fall of Fort Ticonderoga reaches Paris, where Benjamin Franklin has been closely monitoring the war.
He's constantly waiting for his mail. I mean, none of our impatience for our mail could possibly equal what Franklin must have felt at that point. The ignorance is crippling.
But sometimes ignorance is bliss. That the undermanned American army has been forced to retreat in the face of an attack is the last thing Franklin wants to hear. On top of that, he has made little progress with King Louis XVI. Franklin is, after all, the representative of rebels. He is fraught with frustration.
There is nothing better to do here than drink. How can we fool ourselves that France might understand America better than Britain? How can we fool ourselves that a monarchy will help republicans revolt against their monarch? Benjamin Franklin.
The fall of Fort Ty hits General Washington's desk with a thud. His soldiers lost it without so much as a fight. And now the British Army is on the move. 7,000 soldiers are heading down the Hudson. The rest are stationed in New York City. Washington flounders and begins moving his troops up and down the river, hedging his bet against where the Redcoats might attack next. General Washington may be conflicted, but so too are the British. Their commander, William Howe, has gathered up his 13,000 troops and set sail from New York City. Destination unknown. Howe is torn. He is expected to move up the Hudson to aid Burgoyne, but he can't escape his own designs, a fixation on conquering Philadelphia, the rebel capital. His decision, when it comes, will change the course of the war. The mighty Fort Ticonderoga, the gateway to the Hudson River Valley, has fallen to the British without so much as a shot fired. It is another defeat for the undermanned Continental Army and is an ominous start to the summer of 1777. Across the ocean in France, Benjamin Franklin's waiting game continues. Franklin is biding his time, looking for news from America, some victory that would open the gates to Versailles, would convince the French to join the war. But he keeps his intentions to himself. It is a secrecy that breeds intrigue.
For the first year that he's there, there's a real question. Is he here because he's running away from the American Revolution? Is he here to undermine it, or is he here to underwrite it?
Desperate to find out more, both France and England surround Franklin with spies.
It turns out, in retrospect, that his own secretary was a spy, and that anything that crossed Franklin's desk was sent back within the week via a little bottle sunk beneath a tree in the Tuileries to the British government. And those dispatches arrived regularly 72 hours later. Because of the espionage, Franklin realized the only way he could keep a secret was to keep it to himself. And he's very, very closed-mouthed, plays his cards very close to the chest.
Franklin's silence is a calculated diplomatic strategy, akin to his favorite game, chess.
Life is a kind of chess in which we have points to gain and competitors to contend with. By playing at chess, we learn not to make our moves too hastily. Benjamin Franklin.
Franklin follows his own advice too well for some. But he knows the time will come when he finally gets to play his next move. Back across the ocean in America, British General Howe remains adrift off the coast of New York City. 13,000 soldiers on 260 ships still don't know where they are headed. John Burgoyne's plan calls for General Howe to head up the Hudson, yet Howe is intent on Philadelphia. Revenge for his embarrassing losses at Trenton and Princeton.
Howe is obsessed with holding Philadelphia and sustaining Philadelphia, situated almost exactly in the center of the 13 colonies geographically, because it's the political capital. It's where the Continental Congress resides. It's an important strategic center too, both commercially as well as politically.
Howe makes his decision. He will abandon Burgoyne, his Northern Army, and the Hudson Campaign. He will invade Philadelphia. In one move, he changes the course of the war. August 22nd, 1777, Hartsville, Pennsylvania. American scouts bring word to Washington that Howe's fleet has entered the Chesapeake Bay. Their target is now clear. They are headed for the rebel capital. Washington immediately sets his army in motion, marching south through Philadelphia. 3 days later, the British land at Elk Point, Maryland, and begin their northward march. The two armies are now on a collision course. September 11th, 1777, Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. Washington positions his forces along the banks of a tributary called Brandywine Creek. It is here that he will make his stand against the advancing British. Brandywine Creek is the perfect place for a defense. There are only a few crossings along this stretch where troops can be transported from bank to bank, and Washington has them covered. By 7 a.m., the British reach the banks directly across the river from the main force of the Americans. Musket and artillery fire erupt between the two armies. 25,000 soldiers will clash on this day. The battle, intense and bloody. In the thick of the fighting, the Continental Army makes an alarming discovery. The weapons sent secretly by France months earlier have only now arrived, and many of them aren't working. Some of the muskets are fitted with the wrong cartridges. Others have shot of the wrong size. It renders them unusable. On the opposing side, the British are trying out a new and improved rifle. Captain Patrick Ferguson, a skilled marksman, is the inventor. The new weapon is lighter, has a longer range, and in Ferguson's expert hands is deadly accurate. During the fighting, the captain gets a high-ranking officer in his sights. But killing involves more than aim. On the 18th century field of battle, there is also the matter of honor.
The American Revolution occurs during what some historians term the Age of Limited Warfare. These professional military officers, who deemed themselves professionals, did not think that it was gentlemanly nor honorable to intentionally lay low an enemy officer.
It's an easy shot, but Ferguson passes it up. His decision possibly changes history. The man at the end of his barrel was, evidence suggests, George Washington himself. 4 o'clock strikes on the field at Brandywine. The Continental Army has successfully held off the British advances for 8 hours. But all of that is about to change. What Washington doesn't know is that his main force has only been engaging half of Howe's army. The other half has been sent on a day-long march to the west, around the American defenses, and is now headed for a surprise attack from behind. It is the same tactic the British used at the Battle of Long Island, and once again, Washington is surprised by the maneuver. Having outflanked the Americans, the battle quickly becomes a rout. "1,000 American soldiers are wounded or killed. Washington is forced to retreat north, giving up the fight and giving up Philadelphia." Six weeks later, the news reaches America's emissary to France, Benjamin Franklin. His hometown, the rebel capital, Philadelphia, has fallen to the British. In response, the sage statesman makes an unlikely quip. Instead of Howe taking Philadelphia, Philadelphia has taken Howe.
This is not only spin of the finest kind, from a man who, remember, made his name writing hoaxes and dispensing misinformation in his own papers. He knows his job, and his job is essentially to make it appear to the Europeans, and particularly to the French, that the American cause is a viable one, and moreover, that the Americans can win this contest. Those are all of them, at that point, fictions.
Franklin, as shrewd in his diplomacy as he is in his chess, will have to wait yet again. The unanswered question is whether the French will support America in its next move.
Monsieur Franklin, in France, we do not take kings so. Madame de Bourbon, French Duchess.
Ah, madame, we do in America.
Back in the colonies, America's Northern Army is getting ready for a battle that will turn the tide of the war. September 11th, 1777. Washington's army takes on the British at Brandywine Creek. 25,000 soldiers clash, but the Americans are outflanked by their enemy. It is another rout for the British, as the rebel capital Philadelphia falls into enemy hands. But British General Howe's decision to take Philadelphia has meant abandoning his Northern Army. With no knowledge of Howe's choice, General John Burgoyne, leader of Britain's Northern Army, continues his campaign to take the Hudson. And the gentleman general makes sure he travels in style. 30 carts of food, clothing, and liquor take the edge off a campaign through the rugged terrain of upstate New York. Tonight, he is confident and in good cheer. Burgoyne has enlisted help in his campaign, a secret weapon that he believes will give him the upper hand. 500 Native Americans from the League of the Iroquois have joined Burgoyne's army. They will serve as guides to the British, helping them navigate the northern frontier.
The Indians were not really interested in theories of monarchy versus democracy. The Indians were playing it according to how is this going to play for us? Which side is going to be most likely to grant us our sovereignty? Who is our greatest friend, and conversely, who is our biggest threat?
Each Indian nation has to make a choice. Virtually none are able to remain neutral. Most, overwhelmingly, they side with the British.
For the Native Americans, it is a marriage of convenience. A British victory is their best hope for protecting their lands against the westward pushing American colonists. Burgoyne partakes in the ancient practice of sharing a peace pipe, but he wants the Indians to attack the Americans without mercy, and wastes no time broadcasting his objective, issuing a proclamation to the inhabitants of New England a warning to all who stand in his way.
I have but give stretch to the Indian forces under my direction, and they amount to thousands to overtake the hardened enemies of Great Britain wherever they may lurk. The messengers of justice and of wrath await them. General John Burgoyne.
Burgoyne's proclamation is a fateful decision. July 27, 1777, Western Vermont. Two braves capture a woman by the name of Jane McCrae. There is a struggle, a fight. A shot is fired. Jane McCrae dies, but it is unclear who killed her.
There are varying versions of this story, and some contend that in fact she was killed by militiamen firing on the Indians in an attempt to rescue her. However she actually met her fate, this is one of those sort of events that's prone to being manipulated for propaganda purposes.
The story spreads through the colonies with lightning speed and becomes fodder for brutal anti-Indian propaganda of the highest order. It is written that bloodthirsty Indians have killed a white woman, and Burgoyne is held accountable. Back in the British camp, the scalp of Jane McCrae is presented to Burgoyne, who receives it with disgust, even though he is the one who ordered the raids.
The savages, having scalped a young lady, their prisoner, fills me with horror. I would rather put my commission in the fire than serve a day if I could suppose government would blame me for such strong acts, such unheard barbarities.
But Burgoyne's reaction is too little, too late. The killing of McCrae becomes a call to arms. Militia grab their muskets and head to the Hudson Valley and begin to pour into Continental camps. For General Horatio Gates, who arrived on Washington's orders in August to take over as leader of America's Northern Army, it is the boost he has been waiting for. Gates is a proud, albeit disheveled man who comes from a clouded past. Born in Britain to a servant mother, he is rumored to be a bastard son. America has given him an escape from the rigid class structure of Europe. War, a chance to gain glory against his former home. But he harbors even greater ambitions.
Horatio Gates wanted to be commander-in-chief of the American Army. And it goes much beyond that. Whoever was the victorious leader of the revolutionaries would emerge as the leader of a new nation. There had to be a new ruler, some new kind of ruler. No one had decided what yet. I think he might have been that ambitious and that foolish.
Gates adds fuel to the furor over the killing of Jane McCrae, writing an open letter directly to his adversary.
That the famous Lieutenant General Burgoyne should hire the savages of America to scalp Europeans and the descendants of Europeans is more than will be believed in Europe.
They are harsh words to an old friend. Gates knows his rival John Burgoyne well. In the 7 Years' War, they were comrades in arms, registered one after the other in the British military ledger as gentlemen to be lieutenant. Now Gates sees his chance for glory. In beating his old country and gentleman Johnny Burgoyne, he will prove himself to Congress, which, to him, still doesn't recognize his worth. Gates orders his army to a position where he knows the British will have to pass, just south of a region of New York called Saratoga. Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne continues his southward march, but there is no sign of reinforcements. Burgoyne has made a fateful decision to press forward rather than wait for news from Howe. Clues as to what lies ahead are all around him. A royal patrol scouting close to Saratoga comes across a note pinned to a tree. Burgoyne had posted his proclamation. Now the rebels have issued one of their own. Thus far shalt thou go, and no further. September 19th, 1777. With numbers swelled by anti-Burgoyne sentiment, the rebel army is ready for a fight. Horatio Gates sees an opportunity to test the British just south of Saratoga on a piece of land called Freeman's Farm. Gates has a surprise for his enemy. an elite force sent by Washington himself, Daniel Morgan's riflemen. Morgan, a Virginia officer, fought in the 7 Years' War, witnessing firsthand the fighting style of the Native Americans. Inspired by what he saw, he has created guerrilla tactics that are new to the battlefields of the 18th century. Rather than attack in columns head-on, Morgan's men fire from cover. Noon. After a tough morning march through heavily thicketed woods, a forward picket of Burgoyne's army finally reaches a clearing. A moment to rest, they think. But Morgan's men are waiting. Fire rains down with deadly accuracy. All but one British officer is killed or wounded in the first assault. The ambush is followed by bloody skirmishes, the battle swinging back and forth through the afternoon. Until finally, at 4 o'clock, having inflicted their damage, the Americans fall back. The British suffer 600 casualties to the American marksmen and come to understand that these rebels may not give up so easily. In the American camp, militia keep pouring in. The army swells to more than 10,000. Victory against the 5,000 British soldiers now seems possible. Horatio Gates can feel it. So too can another general who wants to capture some glory for himself, Benedict Arnold. But before the two generals take on Burgoyne, they will find themselves in a battle against each other, each vying for credit in a campaign that will change the course of the war. The battle at Freeman's Farm, just outside of Saratoga, New York, has stopped British General John Burgoyne's southward march in its tracks and given confidence to Horatio Gates' troops, whose numbers continue to swell. That confidence is shared by another bold American general who sees his chance for glory, Benedict Arnold. Arnold comes from a prominent Connecticut family that fell on hard times. His alcoholic father squandered away the family's fortune. But Arnold would not yield to his lowly circumstances, achieving great wealth and success in business through sheer will. He has been in the war since the outset and has always made an impression.
He was spit and polish. When he sat on a fine horse, he was literally a commanding figure. Men looked up to him.
It was Arnold who helped snatch Fort Ticonderoga from the British 2 years earlier. But the credit for the victory went to the hard-drinking frontiersman, Ethan Allen. It is a slight that Arnold has not forgotten. But this campaign offers him a chance at redemption, to get the credit he feels he deserves. Meanwhile, around Saratoga, New York, the two armies wait, just miles away from each other. They wait, as soldiers do, for their next order. In the American camp, Gates and Arnold talk strategy over a meal of ox heart. Their army has swelled to twice the size of Burgoyne's. The question is what to do next. And the two generals have two different ideas. Arnold, ever on the offensive, proposes an aggressive act, an attack on Burgoyne. Gates, however, is characteristically circumspect. Let Burgoyne come to them. The conversation turns heated. Tempers flare.
Horatio Gates couldn't stand Benedict Arnold, considered him an upstart, an arrogant upstart. And Benedict Arnold, like many of the revolutionary soldiers, called Gates Granny Gates, a fussy old woman.
But the headstrong Arnold takes his argument one step too far. Gates, in no uncertain terms, reminds Arnold that it is he who is the ranking officer.
And Gates banished his best general from the dinner table, insulted him, wouldn't let him come to meetings, told him to basically stay in your quarters, which were a little hut on the edge of the battlefield. And Benedict Arnold fumed as a result of that dinner and decided that he would have to defy the orders of his commanding officer because he believed the Americans were going to be beaten if it were up to Granny Gates.
In the British camp, General John Burgoyne is filled with frustration. News has finally arrived from Howe. There will be no reinforcements coming from the south. But Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne refuses to retreat.
Burgoyne is exceptionally ambitious. He is definitely a glory hunter. But his greatest failing was that, like many officers of his time, he placed a premium on individual martial glory. He wanted to gain fame for himself. Saratoga should have never happened. Johnny Burgoyne's pride, his hubris, is what precipitated the disaster at Saratoga.
With his supplies dwindling, Burgoyne decides to make one last push. An assault on the Americans just to the south of Saratoga on a rise of land called Bemis Heights. October 7, 1777. Burgoyne sends a reconnaissance force of 1,500 towards the American lines. Gates sets 2,400 of his men out to meet the British. It is the final engagement of the Battle of Saratoga. On the field, Benedict Arnold, in defiance of Gates' orders, leads the charge against the Royals.
Arnold employed snipers. He got riflemen, highly accurate, put them up in trees like snipers, not down in red uniforms with white stripes that you could sight. Arnold fought like an Indian, from cover with camouflage, surprise attacks. It was a new kind of warfare, and the British didn't adapt to it.
Through the smoke of battle, Arnold spots an opportunity he can't ignore. British General Simon Fraser seems to be single-handedly rallying the troops. Arnold makes a snap decision that changes the course of the fight. He orders his men to target the British officer. 1 month earlier, George Washington may have been spared assassination at the Battle of Brandywine. But at Saratoga, British officers are offered no such favor. It takes 3 shots that take down his adversary. With Fraser removed from the battle, the life seems to disappear from the British soldiers, who begin to retreat under the pressure of Arnold's advance. But not before taking a well-placed shot of their own. Benedict Arnold takes a bullet to the leg and barely survives being crushed by his horse.
When the battle was over, his second-in-command said, "Sir, where are you hit?" And Arnold said, "It's my leg. I wish it had been my heart." And I do too. I wish it had been his heart, because if he had died at that moment, he would have been the great hero of the Revolution.
With Arnold's leadership, the British attack is repelled and the campaign to take the Hudson comes to an end. Yet it is Horatio Gates who will take the credit for the victory.
Gates doesn't mention Arnold in his dispatches and garners all the glory for himself. The people and the press hail Gates as the new American hero. In fact, the hero of the battle was Benedict Arnold.
October 17th, 1777, noon. 2 generals meet each other on a field of surrender. After a 7-month campaign down the Hudson, General John Burgoyne comes face to face with his old colleague, Continental General Horatio Gates. Burgoyne's ill-fated journey ends here, with the surrender of 6,000 of his soldiers, the largest capture of British forces in the entire war. Burgoyne will return home a prisoner of war, losing not only his year-old wager, but his military career. General William Howe, who delivered Philadelphia to the British with the best of intentions, has had enough. No one in Britain is celebrating the capture of Philadelphia. Instead, they blame Howe for not coming to Burgoyne's aid. Just 5 days after the surrender at Saratoga, Howe prepares his resignation to return home, leaving behind the rebels and the war that should have ended long ago. Across the Atlantic, America's envoy to France, Benjamin Franklin, receives the news. The victory at Saratoga has changed the war and changed the world.
I don't think anyone was as surprised by the news of Saratoga as Franklin. There had been nothing but bad news from the colonies. It's fair to say certainly that he is waiting for something like this. Saratoga is certainly the thing which finally puts him in a position to be able to sign the deal with the French.
Benjamin Franklin has played his game perfectly. Now, the next move is his. He dons his old blue velvet suit, the same one he wore 3 years ago on the fateful day the British ministry all but accused him of treason. He wears it again, at last, to Versailles and a meeting with the French leadership. The news of victory at Saratoga is exactly what France's King Louis XVI wants to hear. He pledges his army, and more importantly, his navy, to the American cause. It amounts to a declaration of war between France and England. The American Revolution, which started as a far-off colonial uprising, is now a world war. They might be celebrating in Paris, but as the winter of 1777 takes hold, General Washington has less to be joyous about. Horatio Gates's anointment as the hero of Saratoga again raises questions over who should be in charge of this army. Philadelphia, New York, and large parts of the colonies remain in British hands. Washington must turn his army and his leadership around, for the biggest battles still lie ahead. Boston, 1765. Lately, life in the colonies has been relatively tranquil. Certainly it has for Thomas Hutchinson. A fifth-generation Bostonian, Hutchinson has enjoyed good fortune and political success. The king has appointed him Chief Justice and Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts. For years, Thomas Hutchinson has been one of the colony's most admired citizens. Until now. Hutchinson's life is about to take a dramatic and ugly turn. An angry mob is surging through Boston. Hutchinson is about to find out that he's the man they're after. He's the man in charge of the intolerable new policies imposed on the colonies by their British rulers. Tax policies that have incited an increasingly violent rebellion among the people. A rebellion against a tax imposed not by their own local representatives, but by Parliament 3,000 miles away in England. Lieutenant Governor Hutchinson is duty-bound to enforce this controversial new tax. Though he personally opposes it, he is being denounced as a traitor. Massachusetts has never seen a mob as violent as this. They're not just angry about the money. They're angry at the assault on their autonomy by English rulers who neither know them nor represent them. The revolt spreads like an epidemic through all 13 colonies. It's hard to imagine that the fallout from this tax will ignite a social revolution unlike any the world has ever seen. Across the Atlantic, England's King George III is losing his patience. His colonies are acting like petulant children. These are his subjects, Englishmen, born in America, but Englishmen just the same. He is their ruler, and it's because of them that his empire is going broke. A decade ago, he sent British troops across the ocean to defend the colonies against French settlers and their Indian allies. The war went on for 7 years, and it cost England £60 million, money it now desperately needs.
There's a sense that after the 7 Years' War that America ought to pay its way a little bit, that expenses to protect North America should in part be raised in North America.
Parliament's solution is unprecedented. The Stamp Act of 1765 directly taxes colonies by having them pay for stamps that must be affixed to virtually every piece of paper they touch, from official documents to playing cards. It goes badly from the start. The colonists resent not only paying the tax, but also having it imposed by a faraway parliament where no one represents them. Though the Crown appoints colonial governors and high officials, each colony is long accustomed to ruling itself and levying its own taxes.
The Americans believed that over 150 years of being colonists, they had in a sense created a nation within the British Empire. They had free assemblies, democratically elected. They had free and independent and very good newspapers. They had their own tax system.
It wasn't just paying a little bit of money. The notion was that other people were making them pay money. So it's an emotional issue. Who's in control here? We want to control our own lives, which includes, of course, our own pocketbooks.
In 1765, a new generation of colonists is rushing headlong down an uncharted path to an unknown end, and the Stamp Act is what starts it.
Much of the spirit, if not the exact words, is, don't you see what they're up to? Don't you see what's going on? There's a strategy at work here to gradually erode American liberties. If you let them do this, what will they try to do next?
For the British, the tax isn't about eroding liberties, it's about money. Stoking the colonial reaction is a powerful underground movement known as the Sons of Liberty. They meet secretly in taverns across the colonies and come up with every tactic they can to keep government officials from collecting England's tax.
People really started forming alliances between kind of street theater, street gangs, and merchants and artisans, and figuring out ways to all work towards the common cause, which is to repeal the Stamp Act.
Soon enough, things begin to get ugly. Intimidation is a favorite weapon. Those who remain loyal to the king, known as loyalists or Tories, often find themselves terrorized by these self-anointed patriots.
They often use very dramatic techniques, tar and feathering, for instance. This is a great way to humiliate people. First, you're stripped naked. The bucket of tar is heated, and you're coated with tar. And then they put these feathers, these goose feathers, all over you, and you're all hot, and you're prancing about like a silly goose. After a display like this, how is this person going to publicly oppose the patriot position?
A loyalist printer in New York City publishes a loyalist newspaper, and they come in and smash his printing press while they are also proclaiming free speech as a principle to fight for. That's the nature of war and the nature of revolution.
While the angry rabble takes to the streets, men of property and education use printing presses and politics to denounce the Stamp Act tax. One of the most outspoken is 29-year-old John Adams, a bright, ambitious attorney who brings logic and intellect to this very emotional argument. He drafts anti-tax resolutions for some 40 Massachusetts assemblies.
We have always understood it to be a grand and fundamental principle of the English Constitution that no free man should be subject to any tax to which he has not given his own consent. John Adams.
Adams has always envisioned great things for himself, and the cause of liberty presents the opportunity of a lifetime. His wife, Abigail, is his trusted confidant and partner in all things, great and small.
I think it's hard to overestimate the importance of Abigail Adams. I mean, not only is she more than an equal partner to her husband, but she comes to this contest with really perfectly formed ideas about which she feels passionately. She's an enormous influence on her husband.
One day, these two will be counted among the founders of a new nation. For now, John Adams is one of many voices of protest in a Stamp Act rebellion that engulfs all 13 colonies. Down in Virginia, a fiery young legislator named Patrick Henry ups the ante.
Resolved, that the inhabitants of this colony are not bound to yield obedience to any law or ordinance designed to impose any taxation whatsoever other than the laws of their own General Assembly. Patrick Henry.
In other words, no taxation without representation. Henry's Virginia resolves become a radical touchstone for all the colonies. "3,000 miles away in London, another important player in the colonial drama, America's Benjamin Franklin, is doing what he does best: playing chess, flirting with a pretty young thing, and keeping an eye on developments for his countrymen.
Franklin becomes the point man. He is the man in England who is there essentially trying to hammer out some kind of compromise on issues of taxation with the crown.
At 59, Franklin is the most famous American in the world. He has spent the better part of 2 decades in England as a trade representative and the colony's unofficial ambassador, wooing and wowing a London society with his wit and wisdom. This is the Philadelphia printer and writer who created Poor Richard's Almanac, the colony's best-selling annual, rich with homespun advice. He is the scientist who famously flew a kite to experiment with electricity, who invented the lightning rod and the bifocal. A self-made man who went from lowly apprentice to wealthy entrepreneur, Franklin is the embodiment of what it means to be an American. Yet he adores England, the mother country, and especially London.
He's absolutely in his element. This is where the great center of science is at this point. It's like being in the city as opposed to having been in the country. He's really hit the right group of people. And he's very much, he writes these down as the happiest years of his life.
Now the uprising at home has put Franklin at center stage, a place he generally enjoys. London's baffled politicians come pounding on his door, desperate for a solution to the problem, hoping he can use his considerable influence to bring the colonists to their senses. But it's business, not politics, that settles the matter. The decisive blow is the blow to the British pocketbook.
North American merchants said, well, okay, while the Stamp Act is in place, we're just not going to trade with you. It's a way of getting merchants in England to say, if this is going to ruin business, then the Stamp Act's got to go.
Now England's merchants and bankers are feeling the pinch from the loss of business created by colonial boycotts, and they too start railing against the Stamp Act. The tax crisis has become just too big a headache, and in March 1766, a beleaguered Parliament finally repeals the Stamp Act. Unbelievably, the people of the colonies have forced the world's greatest power to back down. The rebel colonists can celebrate their first sweet taste of victory and of power. But the battles are far from over. England still needs the money and still needs to show who's boss. Over the next 4 years, Parliament devises new taxes, which trigger renewed upheaval and end up being repealed. As this seemingly endless cycle continues, England dispatches 2 military regiments to Massachusetts from New York to keep order, adding fuel to the fire. In 1768, 4 more regiments sailed from England on a collision course with America. Boston, 1770. 1,000 British troops occupy this city of 15,000. It is a volatile brew. Boston is an accident waiting to happen, literally.
Conditions are ripe. We've got an indigenous population that is very, very sensitive to having British soldiers quartered amongst them. You have all of these British regiments in Boston. This is something that the Bostonians simply chafe under.
Resentment grows against the soldiers in Boston's streets. On the night of March 5th, a band of local patriots heckles a British sentry standing guard at the customs house. At first, they merely hurl insults, but soon they're hurling snowballs, and 8 more soldiers come to the aid of their comrade.
You have a group of men who are egging on British soldiers, looking for ways to kind of stir up a fight. And now they've created the antagonism that they've been trying to gin up.
Hundreds more colonists pour into the street. They launch a barrage of ice, oyster shells, and rocks at the soldiers. The guards panic. Their guns go off. And when it's over, 5 civilians lay dead on the frozen street.
It was a tragically predictable sort of event. It's one of those situations in which the soldiers that are there to impose order are actually that seed of discontent that's going to produce disorder.
Within hours of the deadly shootings, the Patriot spin machine roars into high gear. A tragic accident is recast as a murderous crime against the colonial people in what becomes known as the Boston Massacre.
This was not remotely a massacre. This was a case in which a mob assailed a small detachment of British soldiers, which may have panicked but had very legitimate cause to fear for their well-being.
But that's not how it's portrayed to the outside world. A local silversmith and artisan named Paul Revere renders an exaggerated version of the event that makes it look like an unprovoked slaughter by the British soldiers. Boston papers are quick to print and distribute Revere's version.
And this becomes the Patriot image of the Boston Massacre, which shows the British lined up in a row, firing their muskets all at once, as if they got the command to fire, which didn't happen that way.
The first to die in the gunfire is a black man, a sailor and runaway slave named Crispus Attucks. He is widely viewed as the first martyr of the American Revolution. In this explosive atmosphere, the public outcry pressures the British to pull their troops out of Boston. The soldiers responsible for the so-called massacre are put on trial for murder, and they are hard-pressed to find an attorney to take their case. Surprisingly, one of Boston's most vocal patriots steps forward, John Adams. Adams is willing to risk everything, his and his family's safety, and his reputation as an ardent advocate of colonial rights. But he believes passionately in the right to a fair trial. Without human rights, the patriot cause isn't worth fighting.
It was one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered. Judgment of death against these soldiers would have been a foul stain upon this country. John Adams.
Adams wins an acquittal for 7 of the soldiers and light sentences for the other 2. Only his unquestioned devotion to the Patriot cause keeps him from being branded a traitor. The crisis is resolved, for now. Back in England, the colonial rebellion becomes a national preoccupation. Over the next 3 years, Parliament keeps trying to impose its authority with new laws and new taxes. As each new law inflames the rebellion, it ends up getting repealed. Except for one, a tax on tea.
The principle involved is that Parliament is sovereign, it can pass laws on whatever it wants. So we're going to just keep this one in place, just because, to assert the fact that we can do this.
The Tea Act puts only a 3-penny tax per pound on the drink of choice for most Americans. It's hardly a burden, but in the current climate, a 3-penny tax still equals oppression. It's all that militant patriots need to strike another blow against the empire. Feathers and coal dust are their weapons. On December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty enlist 50 men to darken their faces, stick feathers in their hair, and arm themselves with hatchets in a bad impersonation of Mohawk Indians. 5,000 people follow them down to Boston Harbor and watch as they climb aboard a merchant ship loaded with tea from England. With British soldiers absent since the Boston Massacre, there is no one to stop them. 342 crates of tea worth 10,000 British pounds are cast overboard. This wanton act of sabotage, which becomes known as the Boston Tea Party, will soon push the two sides to the brink of war.
The British reaction was disgust and outrage. From a British point of view, you had an entire colony running amok. And the British government, after the Tea Act, frankly said, we've had enough. We've had enough with Massachusetts. And we're going to clamp down on them. And we're going to make Massachusetts an example of what happens if you defy the authority of Parliament.
At that very same time, the British discover yet another outrage committed by an American, someone they thought they could trust, Benjamin Franklin. Over a year ago, Franklin was passed a stolen packet of confidential letters written to a British official by Massachusetts Governor Thomas Hutchinson. Ever since Stamp Act rioters tore down Hutchinson's house 9 years earlier, he had tried to juggle serving his king with serving his angry fellow citizens. The letters given to Franklin exposed Hutchinson's true loyalist sympathies.
There must be an abridgment of what are called English liberties. I wish, for the good of the colony, to see some further restraint of liberty, rather than the connection with the parent state should be broken. Thomas Hutchinson.
Franklin sent the incriminating letters to colonial assemblymen in Massachusetts, who had recently made them public as irrefutable proof of Hutchinson's treachery against the Patriot cause. The reaction in the colonies was torrential. Mobs burned Hutchinson's effigy. The press vilified him. By December, when the Patriot Raiders throw the Boston Tea Party, they have destroyed Hutchinson's long career as a public servant. Within 6 months, Thomas Hutchinson will pack up his family and sail to England. The relentless strife that has set American against American will force this man, long devoted to colonial causes, into exile. Heartbroken, he will never again set foot in his beloved homeland. Now, in London in January 1774, Benjamin Franklin is summoned to appear before the King's Council. On the heels of the recent looting of the tea in Boston Harbor, Franklin's recently revealed role in the Hutchinson fiasco is more than British officials can tolerate. he must answer for his sins and the sins of his countrymen.
Franklin is dressed down by the Solicitor General of England for a full hour in the strongest possible language. I mean, it's really abusive language. In front of a crowd, is going wild at this venomous attack. And Franklin stands stock still in this humiliating moment, head erect, and doesn't say a word for an hour. Many people have dated that as the moment at which Franklin becomes a revolutionary.
Franklin the revolutionary is done with England, and England is done with him. Parliament punishes Massachusetts with a vengeance. It revokes the colony's 80-year-old charter, dissolves its local assemblies, and after a 4-year absence, sends 3,000 troops to reoccupy Boston. The Crown now runs Massachusetts.
These people had been meeting in town meetings for 150 years. When they can no longer decide their own fate, they said, this is the end. People throughout Massachusetts rose up as one and said, no way.
There is no turning back for either side. The tension between the people of Massachusetts and the British troops becomes unbearable. It's only a matter of time before someone fires the shot that will echo around the world. Boston, August 10th, 1774. John Adams is donning a new suit, and if he's not careful, the British will bury him in it. The Patriot leader is heading for a secret meeting in Philadelphia that will change the course of history and could cost him his life. Adams is one of 4 men representing Massachusetts at the First Continental Congress, an unprecedented, and as far as the king is concerned, illegal meeting of delegates from up and down the colonies. 55 delegates of America's best and brightest who gather to come up with a unified strategy to oppose Britain's increasing encroachment on their liberties. If the king had his way, they would all hang for treason.
That illustrates how strongly they felt that they must take steps to remove themselves from what they saw as the arbitrary power of the British Crown.
Britain has already suspended Massachusetts' constitution and imposed martial law there. The other colonies fear that it's only a matter of time before they all meet the same fate.
Even though these colonies have different economic interests, they have different political histories, they have different populations, they recognize that in our relationship with Britain, we have much in common.
Not all of these people have met each other. Most have heard about each other. Now they're eager to meet each other, see what's going to happen. People know that there's going to be moderates and not so moderates, and there's already kind of little factions forming.
Joining John Adams from Massachusetts is another radical, 37-year-old John Hancock, a wealthy Boston merchant who has been using his considerable fortune to fuel the cause. Pennsylvania has sent a moderate lawyer, John Dickinson, 42, whose widely read essays back in the 60s helped launch the anti-tax movement. From Virginia comes Patrick Henry, the volatile young orator whose Virginia resolves helped stamp out the Stamp Act. And also from Virginia, a wealthy 42-year-old planter and veteran of the 7 Years' War, George Washington.
One of the problems is they all thought of themselves as Pennsylvanians, Rhode Islanders, South Carolinians, much more than they thought of themselves as Americans. Patrick Henry really just electrifies everyone when he says, I am no longer a Virginian, I am now an American. John Adams says the trick is to get 13 clocks to strike all at the same time, 13 ships to sail in the same formation. It's not easy.
13 conspirators against the crown. Finally, after 2 months of arguing and pontificating, the Congress adjourns with a unified message for England. Until colonial rights are restored, all 13 colonies will halt all trade with Great Britain. Local militias are to arm and stand in readiness. As one might expect, kings don't do well with ultimatums. No one tells the King of England what to do.
The die is now cast. The colonies must either submit or triumph. I do not wish to come to severer measures, but we must not retreat. I trust they will come to submit.
He makes the assumption that a simple show of force, of military might, will be enough to scare the rebels back to their senses.
Not likely. Certainly not in Boston. The city is a tinderbox waiting to explode. The British have turned it into a virtual police state. They have sealed off Boston Harbor, disbanded the colonial assemblies, and forced locals to house British troops. The man in charge is Commanding General Thomas Gage. His orders are to quash the rebellion. And while he has the guns, the rebels have the numbers. He repeatedly asks the Crown for a larger army.
Thomas Gage only has 3,000 soldiers in Boston. He's looking at 5,000 in Worcester County, 4,000 in Plymouth, all over like this. He's looking at this. He says, what am I going to do with my 3,000 people against force like this? He's playing a losing hand. He can't do anything, for which he is called an old woman.
He's very much a man in between. He's a military officer who is charged with a political task for which he's not really equipped to handle.
With Hutchinson's departure, Gage is now Massachusetts governor and commander of an occupying army that no longer faces a small rebellion. It is a population in uprising.
They start smuggling cannons out of Boston, and they start purchasing arms, and the militiamen start training, and they form the Minutemen. They actually sign associations. I will mobilize on a minute's notice.
This is no longer a skirmish over taxes. The Patriots believe their way of life, their liberty, and their property are at stake. Nothing short of war will settle it. In April 1775, Gage gets orders from England to break the uneasy stalemate. He will send a full force out to the countryside to seize a huge store of rebel ammunition. Unknown to Gage, Parliament, King George, or anyone else, the fate of the British Empire hangs on this decision. April 18th, 1775. British troops are on the march. Colonial militia are arming and stockpiling ammunition for what many fear is an inevitable showdown. British Commander General Thomas Gage has ordered his soldiers to capture a huge hidden store of gunpowder in Concord, a Massachusetts village 20 miles west of Boston.
The British detachment that marches out of Boston, roughly 800 soldiers, march out knowing that the countryside is on the verge of armed action. Once Gage sends that mission out, he really has set into motion a chain of events that is beyond his ability to control.
The British are indeed coming.
The news starts leaking out, and people start mobilizing. They're ready.
Out into the countryside to spread the word goes Paul Revere, whose engraving of the Boston Massacre fanned the flames of outrage 5 years earlier. Poems and school books will one day mythologize Revere's midnight ride as if he were the lone heroic messenger. But in fact, he is just one part of a whole system of communication.
Paul Revere is one of dozens, then scores, and literally hundreds of messengers going every which way. Bells are ringing, the shots are being fired. So before dawn, hours before dawn, the whole countryside is mobilized and knows what's happening.
They arrange a signal, one lantern light in Boston's Old North Church if the British are coming by land, and two if by boat. British troops row to the Cambridge side of the Charles River and wade through reeds and thick marshland to begin their overnight march to Concord. At around 1 in the morning at Lexington, Massachusetts, farmers, blacksmiths, and shopkeepers gather to intercept the British at Lexington Green. 130 civilians, some too old, some too young, most with no formal military experience, stand ready to risk it all against the world's most feared army.
These were men who literally felt under attack. And in fact, they were under attack. The British Army were walking out to seize colonial property, and they felt compelled to defend it.
2 a.m. After an hour of waiting, no sign of the British. The night's chill sends many home. Others choose nearby Buckman's Tavern to await another alarm. Most hoping it will never come. at 4:30 a.m. Drums announce that the British are on their way.
I'm sure the mood on Lexington Green was extremely tense. The best trained, most professional army in the world is bearing down on them. So even though they were fired up with a great sense of injustice, they were probably nervous. And if they weren't, they should have been.
That's it. Okay. Stand back, lads. Stand back. Take care. Halt. Right. Face.
Both sides eye each other suspiciously, both sides not wanting to take a misstep. All of a sudden, a single shot is fired. Nobody knows who fired the shot. After the war and investigations, nobody ever found out. As soon as that shot was fired, both sides commenced firing at will, and the American Revolution was on.
Concrete! Fire! Fire! Ready! Quickly! Quickly! Treason! Fire!
In less than 2 minutes, 8 militiamen lay dead, 10 wounded.
It really lit up the newspapers everywhere. Blood had been shed, and there was really no looking back after that.
It will take 6 weeks for the news to reach London. By then, the course is set.
I think there's a recognition in London after Lexington that the battle has been joined, that the chances for preventing this conflict from degenerating into war has just about passed.
The conflict calls Benjamin Franklin home from London. After nearly 20 years in England, he is leaving for good, no longer loyal and no longer welcome. Branded a revolutionary traitor by the British, Franklin will set sail for his Philadelphia home to take a seat in the Continental Congress. A man of peace, he will now have to counsel war as he helps his fellow delegates navigate the new and bloody conflict that threatens to blow America apart. April 19th, 1775, Lexington, Massachusetts. For the first time ever, British soldiers and colonial citizens have stood face to face and fired upon each other. 8 colonists lay dead. But it's not over. The British continue their advance to get what they came for, the colonial ammunition stored in nearby Concord. Along the way, detachments of redcoats storm into local homes and ransack for weapons. The word spreads, and militia from all over the area rush toward Concord to head off the British. This time, it's the Americans who are coming.
They find not just the Concord militiamen, but all sorts of other militiamen coming and still coming and still coming and still coming.
The British are certain they can swat these militia away like pesky flies, and find that they cannot, that they've encountered hard-fighting men.
The British are badly outnumbered. They are forced to retreat. 16 miles separate them from the safety of Boston. 16 miles on foot. They are sitting ducks for armed and angry colonials. It is a trauma they won't soon forget.
All the hills on either side of us were covered with rebels, so that they kept the road always lined and a very hot fire on us without intermission. Henry de Bernier, British soldier.
"20 hours of constant barrage bring heavy losses to the beleaguered British. 73 dead, 174 wounded, and 26 missing. The Americans suffer 49 killed, with 40 wounded and 5 missing. By the time British soldiers get back to Boston, the colonials have the city surrounded, with militia from neighboring colonies on their way. Gage and his troops are trapped, with their backs to the sea.
The rebels have added insult to outrage. They have possessed the roads and other communications by which the town of Boston was supplied with provisions, and with a preposterous parade of military arrangement they have effected to hold the army besieged. Thomas Gage.
3 weeks later, on May 10th, 1775, Benjamin Franklin is back home in Philadelphia, just as the Continental Congress is called back into emergency session. The bloodshed in Massachusetts demands a new colonial strategy. Assembling a continental army and complete independence from England are subjects now on the table. The delegates eagerly await the thoughts of their venerated elder statesman, Benjamin Franklin, only to find him unusually quiet and withdrawn. The long voyage from England has made him ill, but it is the short trip he will soon make that troubles Franklin most. Franklin is headed to a confrontation with his only son, 43-year-old William. The rift in the colonies has brought a terrible split between father and son. William Franklin has been New Jersey's royal governor for over a decade, a post granted him by the king, owing in no small part to being Benjamin's son. William is vehemently opposed to the rebellion and unalterably devoted to the king. Now his father will make one last attempt to win him over to the patriot side. Once they were as close as a father and son could be. It was William who held the kite during his father's famous experiment with lightning. It was William who was his father's constant companion in the early days in England. But now, neither the strife in the colonies nor the humiliation heaped upon his father by the British turns William away from the king. Now, father and son must choose between country and family, but neither will bend. Like the growing civil war between patriots and loyalists, reconciliation between father and son is no longer possible.
There were two sides to this issue. Most people could have seen both sides. Everyone had reasons to see those sides. Franklin isn't buying it, and he gives his son, he's absolutely unyielding with his son.
Nothing has ever hurt me so much and affected me with such keen sensation as to find myself deserted in my old age by my only son. And not only deserted, but to find him taking up arms against me in a cause wherein my good fame, fortune, and life were all at stake.
When I think about Benjamin Franklin, the great revolutionary, and his son, the leader of those conservative loyalists, it seems very strange to me that the old man should be the radical and the young man should be the conservative.
Once they were inseparable. Now the wound between father and son will never heal.
William Franklin doesn't get very good press in the American textbooks, but you know there were many others just like William Franklin. Which side are you on? That became the question.
The political argument that tears the Franklins apart will also be replayed in thousands of colonial families. Politics have become intensely personal.
Every American had to choose. Do I support the Patriots? Do I support the Loyalists? Is there any neutral ground between them?
A bitter time is coming when everyone must choose sides, when fathers may have to fight sons, when brother may fight brother. There are twice as many patriots in the colonies as loyalists, but more than half the population just wants to be left alone. In the coming months and years, no one can remain on the sidelines. The ship has sailed. The revolution is on an irreversible course. It will take sturdy leadership from men as different in temperament as the people they represent. Whether they know it or not, these are the men of destiny who will guide the American people into their uncertain future. And these are the men who will shed their blood and give their lives to make it happen.